Welcome to another episode of my Deuze vlog. My name is Mark Deuze. I'm a professor of media studies at the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And in this series of interviews and conversations, I document people, media professionals, and scholars from around the world working in the area of health, well-being, and happiness, psychosocial safety in creative careers, in film, in television, in journalism, in games, in advertising, in music, in social media, and so on and so forth. And today, I'm sitting down with Ben Steele, who's calling in from Brisbane, Australia. Ben has been an actor and producer in film since he was 6 years old, as he will talk about in the interview. And in 2019, he produced and published a documentary film called The Show Must Go On, which is available on Vimeo, documenting his own struggle with health and well-being in the screen industry through a series of interviews with colleagues and friends from around the Australian industry. This led to the founding of an organization called Screenwell, an organization founded by Ben, dedicated to promote and support healthy working practices in the Australian screen industry, organizing individual coaching and support, contributing to research and surveys on health and well-being in the industry, offering summits, workshops, and online psychosocial safety course, and so on and so forth. And in the interview, we talk about the uniqueness of health struggles in creative industries. Acknowledging, of course, that workers in all industries and people in all walks of life come across issues and struggles in their work and their life. But there are certain aspects particular or unique to the creative environment. We talk about the specific challenges and responsibilities for leaders in creative fields, producers, directors, editors-in-chief, those kind of people propelled into leadership positions, wanting to do well by their people, but often struggling and feeling unsupported in the process. And of course, appreciating the multiple pressures and stressors on people in the industry at this time, and ending, which I really appreciate, on a hopeful note, on signaling a hopeful shift in the industry of paying perhaps a bit less attention to all the stuff of the industries, the studios, the equipment, the gear, the kit, and shifting attention to the people that really make the industry work. I really hope you enjoy the conversation. Please check out all the other conversations in this series with people from media companies and universities around the world, trying to make things better for our professional storytellers. Thanks so much, Ben, for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it, and good to see you again. Um, um, so we just jump right in, and
Yeah,
because
sure.
I mean I've got a lot to ask, but one thing, and we talked about this before, which is striking, is just the last couple of months witnessing from afar the work that Screenwell is doing. I mean, you launched a learning platform. There's a lot of publicity and attention to people taking a psychosocial safety for the screen industry course. I mean, there was a big screen leaders summit at the ABC. You've participated in research with Griffith University, new research coming out about the Australian screen industry and how people are doing or not doing. Um, uh, Maybe a quick check-in. How are you holding up? And but also sort of like your response to all of this. Like, how do you see this all of this happening and the response you're getting?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for asking. Great to see you again, Mark. Yeah, I'm going pretty well. Like I think through my own, personal struggles, which kind of started this whole journey, I've built some pretty like robust kind of strategies for myself to
Mm,
make sure that I am, looking after myself and getting what I need. And that doesn't mean there's not times, just like in the industry, where you have to work that little bit longer,
mm,
and work on weekends sometimes, to do the work that I do. But the reason I can do that is because I do have those things in place. And I guess that's what I'm encouraging others in the industry to do as well. There's certain aspects about the industry that, to a degree we can't change. There's some things we're trying to change, but there's things in the industry that it is, it is the way it is. We're probably going to be working really long hours, really, really intensely, really, really focused work. There's stuff about the industry that we can't change. So we need to learn what we can do to work the healthiest that we can. So having those kind of plans and strategies, I bring myself
mm.
to play. Yeah, so we have it's been a journey, and it feels like we are kind of getting some things done. We are doing some work that I'm really proud of. And yeah, I guess the reaction to what we're doing is quite positive. And I guess the way that I guess it hits me the most that way is by people kind of, reaching out and asking us, to deliver training or wanting to get involved. So I think it's reached a bit of a point there where, to be completely honest, we kind of can't keep up at the moment. The capacity side of things of what we're able to do, we're kind of reached
Wow.
that point now where we're at that point of, okay, so we really do need to build, capacity to be able to now meet the demand.
Mhm.
Prior to this point,
Yeah.
we have, been trying to drive the demand, I guess, like a better way of saying it. Now we've got that point. Now we need to, make sure that we're going to be able to deliver what people are asking us to do.
And is that a sign of an industry shift? I'm thinking of. I mean, there's because it's interesting, right? There's individual people in the industry knocking on your door to take your course or to ask for help and support. Then there's sort of organizations reaching out, like the ABC, the Screen Leaders, the Summit, and those kind of things, and production companies, I'm assuming, reaching out, and then you're involved in stuff that is about the sector as a whole, like
Mm.
participating in the research and those kind of things. I mean, just a new survey that just came out that Screenwell was involved in as well. That's like a lot of chess pieces on a lot of different
Mm.
boards. I mean, is it all happening simultaneously, or is there anything that jumps out at you that has been particularly sort of meaningful and sort of a sign of an industry that's moving the needle on health?
I mean, I definitely would say that it could be seen as a sign as the needle is shifting
Hmm.
because of this kind of engagement. Um, last year, nationally and slowly state by state and territory by territory in Australia, the legislation kind of firmed up around psychosocial safety in Australian workplaces. So I think that legislative requirement has helped also to kind of direct business owners and leaders in the industry to kind of go, oh, there's this thing I need to understand, and I guess we were placed to help in that regard. And certainly that's the first course that we've launched on the learning platform, which is psychosocial safety for the screen industry.
Right.
So that course was designed specifically for that. So taking all the government frameworks and legislation around how do you assess and mitigate or eliminate those kind of hazards and risks in our workplaces, and then making it screen specific to help people kind of understand it. So yeah, that course is going really well. There's yeah, some kind of really exciting things happening with that, and that will continue to grow and improve, as will new courses that will release by the end of the year as well.
Um, Making these kind of efforts, I mean, like, when you do a summit or a masterclass or an online course, making them specific for the screen industry suggests that there is indeed something unique or particular to creative careers, particularly in the screens. I mean, is there like a do you have a formula? Like what I mean, I certainly have, from the research that I've been doing. I mean, there's a lot of things to be said about this, and for me, the key keeps coming back to this weird conundrum that we're facing is that people get into the industry based on something that is all encompassing, right? I mean, call it passion, call it labor of love, call it a romantic notion of what making film or something is all about, and then sooner or later realizing that the industry isn't really designed to accommodate this properly. So,
Mm.
that weird tension, that is perhaps unique to this work, or is there something else? Like, so what makes things specific to the screen? What have you found makes it possible to communicate these kind of ideas about psychosocial safety at work
Mm.
and healthy work conditions to screen industry professionals?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm at the belief that screen workers, the screen industry, we're not special. We're not facing things that others are not facing. Um, at the core of mental health and well-being, any kind of struggle that's kind of happening there, it's a human struggle.
Hmm.
Every human can relate to, stress or anxiety. Yeah. The,
Sure.
the triggers or maybe the causes of that might be different, but what we're dealing with here is like human issues. So I don't think we're unique or special from that perspective, but I think some of the challenges that we face are maybe uniquely ours, or the accumulation of facing multiple pressures at the same time is uniquely, what we go through in the screen industry or the creative industries more broadly. So
Mm.
it's a culmination of stresses happening all at the same time that I think is what maybe is a little bit more unique about the work that we do.
Sure.
And certainly as far as our role and our perspective on how to kind of shift that, there are, generalized kind of supports. We're really lucky in Australia. We do have, a wealth of information out there. But what's difficult is how do you actually translate that for my unique circumstances? So that's an important function that we play as Screenwell is we're translating information. We're translating broad, psychological concepts that can relate to every person, but we're making it unique. We're using our storytelling skills, really.
Mm.
We're using our what we know about human nature and how do you tell story to make sure in our guides, in our training, in everything we do, that we're filtering it through that story lens of, okay, what story do we need to tell to make sure that they understand psychosocial safety, why it's important, why it's relevant to me, using scenarios from our industry that make it relatable. Because that piece is not being done. And if we truly want to make the impact, if we want to change culture, if we want to change beliefs, people need to understand what they're doing. So bullying and harassment, for example, we've had, since the Me Too movement, shortly thereafter, had, our codes of conduct that way in the Australian screen industry, the around bullying, harassment, discrimination.
Right.
But it's a document with legal words and stuff.
Mm.
They're all in our contracts now, all that stuff. But the missing piece again is that translation piece. that really customized piece of training, that people on the ground helping support people and explain why it's important, helping, stop small little issues developing into bigger issues, having that support on the ground to help mitigate all that. That's what's needed, that support piece. So it's great the government have legislation around it. It's great, our screen agencies are kind of asking, "Oh, have you got a policy in place?" But who's helping people implement those things and understand those things? So just one example of what we do. And the Screen Producers Association, I think it was probably about 18 months, 16 months ago now, they came out with their Respectful Workplace training module that
Mhm.
the screen producers have access to, and they can put their cast and crew through. So we now have that customized intervention, but still helping people understand that further and the little issues that come up in the workplace,
Mm.
they still need support with.
One thing that I've been told by colleagues such as yourself working on this issue of mental health and well-being and psychosocial safety, specifically in creative contexts, is that with reference to what you're just mentioning, like specific policies or labor laws or those kind of things, it's is that that is almost like those are pretty useless if they are not aligned with how the work actually gets done and experienced by people. And that aligns with what you're saying about this translating that you have to do. And one thing that I've gotten back from these interviews as well is how significant the run up to these kind of policies and offerings that any organization can bring about master classes or workshops or whatever, that simply to normalize the conversation around these things. And which leads me to asking you a little bit about how how have you seen this conversation evolving, because you've been doing this for quite a while, and of course a major impetus to all of this was your own personal experience of being part of this industry, of struggling at some point, and then documenting your own experience in The Show Must Go On. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that history, and then specifically The Show Must Go On, and what that brought to then, of course, becoming Screenwell?
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like in on the ground in workplaces, really understanding what's happening on the ground, and how these policies interact with what's happening on the ground
Mm,
is really, really important. And it's important that we have these policies or these targets or these things that we're moving towards, but we also need to help people with the transition of the change, because just having a target or having a policy is not going to create the change. So helping support people through that. As far as yeah, my own kind of involvement in this space, I've been involved in this space now for probably about 8 years.
right.
Worked in the industry my whole life. Coming up to 40 years in the industry now.
No. Yeah.
Started out as a child actor. As soon as I understood that that was a thing you could do when I was 6 years old, doing a poetry reading on stage at primary school, that's where it hooked in with me. And I was like, okay, this is where I want to be. I want to be on the stage. I want to perform. I want to, there's an audience there. They're quiet. My parents are quiet. People are looking at me, and what I've got to say is important, right? That was the start of the German
Yeah.
of the bug for me, and the passion evolving for the industry, and I just pursued that with everything that I had in every fiber of my being. As I started to kind of grow up a little bit, I got more interested as well behind the scenes. So I started making my own little shorts, through school and things like that. And then that led into, as well as getting, professional work as a kid actor in the industry. Then whenever there were school holidays, I used to just try to hang out on sets, like just walk into TV stations when security wasn't bad. But security was pretty bad back then, and you could kind of get in, and there's this kid, and they're like, "Okay, what are you doing here?" It's like, "I just want to watch. I really love film and TV." And like, "Okay, sit over there and just watch." So I did. So
Wow.
that's where I guess the bug, the passion, and all that inspiration kind of came from. It just felt like that's where I was meant to be. That was my
Mm.
home. I just was curious and I just wanted to learn about lighting and about everything. I just loved it. And I guess jump forward, a few years after working in the industry a long time and, getting into, my 20s, my 30s, and the career not being what I wanted it to be and not hitting the milestones that I wanted it to achieve. And just, I guess, knockback or chip by chip, it just started to kind of build up. And I didn't have the emotional or psychological kind of skills to kind of navigate those hits, like many. Um, and yeah, I came back from working overseas I was living overseas for about 9 years and came back to the industry. And I just realized it felt different. It felt different back here in Australia.
Mm.
And I was hearing that from my colleagues as well. And I just thought, okay, well, I've got these skills. I had cameras and lighting and microphone equipment that I'd accumulated over the years of making stuff myself. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do some interviews and I'll put them online. And that's possibly going to help some people, like just short little things. And shortly into the interview process of just speaking to colleagues and friends, I realized that, yeah, this is bigger than just releasing a couple of short videos, and it became a documentary. It became The Show Must Go On that I released in 2019. And through that process as well, I really started to unpack myself and what I was feeling, and realized how I had been struggling for quite a long time, for quite a while, and depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation, and those thoughts, and my self-worth and my identity, and lots of things I had to kind of work through and unpack. And speaking to colleagues in the industry and understanding their struggles, but also their solutions and what they were doing kind of really helped me to kind of work through myself, as well as getting support from a wonderful counselor therapist, and the support of friends and family to kind of help me through that. But certainly making the film really really helped me as well.
Right.
And so yeah, so released the film, and it's been out there for a while now. And yeah, still get people coming up or from time to time going, "Oh, you made that film that was really good." So I'm very proud of that. I'm very, very proud of what we all as a team achieved on that project. And it possibly was, yeah, one of the starting conversation starters for the
Right.
industry.
Yeah, it's I mean, and something that admittedly I use when I do presentations about the topic. There's a scene, or I mean, and one of the interviews in your film is with Sam Neill, and he says something in that interview. I think he also used it in the trailer for The Show Must Go On. That is so deceptively simple, but somehow for me really powerful. And I wonder if you might want to talk a little bit about it or comment on it. Because he talks about exactly what you're saying, not just, oh yeah, now sometimes I struggle, but more about how he's dealing with it. And you would think,
Mm.
oh, Sam Neill, like, he's fine, right? But no, 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 no. It's that. And so it first makes you aware that this is not something you only experience at, whatever, the bottom end of the industry, but it affects everyone. And then secondly, this comment that he makes about that what helped him was to realize or to remind himself, this is not who I am, this is what I do.
If you think of yourself as an actor or a dancer or a singer, and you're not singing and you're not acting or you're not dancing, what are you? Most people are between jobs. What are you between jobs? And if you think of yourself as an actor and you're not actually acting, you're kind of no one. This is how it's possible to see yourself, and the way out of that is to actually separate yourself from your profession. That's what I do, that's not what I am. I do acting, but I'm not an actor. I don't think of myself as an actor, actually.
This is something I've been hearing from talking with other people in different parts of the world in this industry about that the industry, I think you mentioned it earlier as well as your experience as a child, so that because you believe that this is where you belong, which is very powerful, but then it can also become all consuming and you forget that it's also just a skill set. And so what is that quote mean to you, if you don't mind reflecting on that a bit, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because quite often I think what happens, and this is certainly what I had to unpack myself personally, is how my identity and how my definition of success was tied into my own self-worth.
Mm,
So for me on my own unpacking and recovery, I had to really kind of unpick that a little bit. So for me, I was only successful if I was in like a network TV show or a Hollywood film, like a big film, not an independent film. That
right.
was what, you know, when I drilled it down, when I actually kind of looked at what success mean, was it TV commercial? No. Was it corporate video? No. Was it student films? No. Was it those guest roles? No. That wasn't enough to where I wanted to get to. So I really kind of had to look at what did that mean? So in the simple task of actually performing a scene, in actually doing the job, whether it's on a big budget movie or a student film, I'm doing the same thing. So why does it matter? Why is it so caught up? Why is my identity and my worth so caught up in a thing? So that then turns to the external validation, right? So
Right.
I really had to look at why was I doing this? Why was it so important to me? And really kind of unpack that personally. So what Sam's quote it's what I do. It's not who I am.
Hmm.
For me, it's a reminder that you are more than just what you do. You are more than your job.
Mm,
There's so many wonderful things about me. There's so many wonderful things about you.
mm,
You know, we do so many different things. So that was the I guess the message for me, and it truly was in that moment, hearing that come out of Sam's mouth and who he is, as you alluded to, it had a certain amount of weight that it really did hit me deeply. And I was like, huh. I
mm,
didn't have the full, it wasn't like an instantaneous healing or anything like that. I had to still then do the work, but it
right.
certainly was significant and a catalyst for me to then go down there and figure that out a little bit more for myself. Because we're all unique. We all have to unpack certain things
Sure.
in our own way based on our own experiences and our own upbringings and so many different things. So even though that quote may impact, you know, heaps of people, they'll have to uniquely unpack it for what it means to them to have the, I guess, the full benefit or the potential for growth or the opportunity that will bring. So yeah, it was a really powerful moment. Yeah, it changed my life.
Mm. And the I mean, and we've spoken before about this, you didn't just sort of like turn those interviews into a short film and then, okay, I'm done now. But um, you mentioned before that, when you had screenings, there were people there that could actually stimulate or moderate an ensuing conversation and really invest in that conversation. I mean, that certainly sounds like taking a lot more responsibility than just documenting, your own personal experience. But
Mm.
that also comes with, I mean, it's the old Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibilities.
Mm.
I mean, how did you transform, if I may ask, from, documenting your own personal history and experience to then taking on the responsibility of enabling a sector-wide or an industry-wide conversation? I mean, that's
Mm.
quite a lot to take on, and it's obviously it's had profound impact. But I wonder where that happened in the process.
Um, I think the starting point really was I was through the making of the film, I was personally invested in the answers. So
Hmm.
I think it started there. The personal investment, I had skin in the game. I wanted to know what was happening and what the answers were. I wanted to know what the problems were. I wanted to know what the solutions were. I had skin in the game.
Mm.
So that's, I think, where it started. So when you've got skin in the game, and as you learn more and more, and you start to kind of unpack it, you go, okay, well, I've got this knowledge now. How can I help?
Yeah.
And I guess another kind of point along making the doco as well. there was a point where somebody reached out to me to be interviewed, and they were currently struggling and they wanted to go on camera.
Mm.
And everyone I'd spoken to prior to that point had been through their recovery, and they were talking retrospectively. Still traumatic and challenging, for them to kind of, potentially unpack that again and go there again. But they had, recovered. This person was reaching out whilst they were still in the depths of it. Which on this journey of, well, how do we then as a filmmaker look after people you're interviewing, became the question that I needed to solve. So I did the research to try to find a guide, a filmmaking guide about how do you, ensure, the contributors in your documentary are safe, and how do you, make sure they have support, and what do they need when you're unpacking this stuff. And nothing existed.
Mm. Yeah.
So I spoke to a couple of mental health organizations that had some stuff, and I kind of just wrote my own very, very basic protocols to ensure the safety of that person I was interviewing, and checking in with them, and did they have psychological help, and a few basic principles that people had, these experts had taught me. And then, flash forward only a couple of years ago, I finally had that PDF produced, the Wellbeing for Documentary. And that's now a guide that Screenwell has on our website. And it started all the way back there 6 years ago.
Right.
And now we have this guide about documentary filmmakers. How do you look after your contributors? How do you look after yourself? How do you look after your crew? How do you look after your audiences? That's now out there in the world for anyone to use for free. So I guess it's the mission for me since making the doco. COVID happened in between, and that kind of directed my focus. Some of the industry during COVID turned to myself and my producer of the show Must Go On, Sue Maslin, as people that had made a doco and were doing, little screenings and looking after people in this space. They turned to us, how are we going to help the industry in this time? So we created some webinars for the industry at that point. So that was our first kind of foray into bits of education and information for the industry. So that was another kind of turning point of, this is what you can actually do to help Ben. That's what we can do. We can do workshops and webinars. So it's basically just been growing since then, based on the needs that have emerged. And you go, how are we going to solve that? What do we know? Who do we need to speak to? Which experts do we need to speak to? And then you just do it. And so that's how we've just been growing and growing, based on what's needed. This is needed. Let's do that. Let's deliver that. Okay, now what's needed? Let's do this, and just keep going.
So, I mean, I do have a very specific question about that, but maybe zooming out a bit, I wonder if you can help me figuring something out about Australia. Because it's a lot of the stuff is like what you're doing, what Andy Wright is doing with Never Not Creative in the Australian advertising industry, Mia's Wellbeing Committee. There's a lot happening in this space, specifically in Australia. I mean, and a lot of what's happening elsewhere in the world, including in my own country, is benchmarked by the work that you do and your colleagues at MIA and other organizations do and have been doing, like you said, for 6, 8, 10 years. The first types of research among industry professionals to document this came out of Australia first. What's going on with Australia? I mean, it's
I guess
amazing,
one could
right?
say we need the help more than anyone else. Is that where it's coming from? No, I'm joking. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I could really. I don't know. I don't know if it's anything different. Certainly, when I was making the film as well, I would say the UK is kind of leading the way in the creative industries this way. The most, as far as having organizations and specific kind of interventions in play. But that wasn't the case when I was making The Show Must Go On.
Right.
There was a tiny little bit of thing happening out of equity out of the UK, and that was about in 2016, 17,
Right.
around about that time. And I was looking for inspiration, and there was nothing. But then the UK Film and TV Charity changed their kind of direction and mandate into the wellbeing kind of space, and then they did their first report and the research, and then things have taken off, and then now you've got wellbeing, facilitators over there, and Screen Skills, UK Screen Skills,
Sure.
lots of stuff happening there. So yeah, I guess in a way, like I'd probably say that yeah, it started in like the first starting point of some of this stuff maybe did start with some of the things in Australia and then has grown elsewhere. And then
Mm.
I would say that maybe in Australia now we are now catching back up, or trying to kind of, catch up.
Yeah.
And it's not a competition, of course. I don't want it to be coming across that way, but as far as how maybe things have evolved, and certainly we're, chatting to folks around the globe, including the UK, about, shared information and how can we all work together and kind of grow together.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that struck me about this is that, I mean, a lot like you mentioned, film and TV charity in the UK, or Behind the Scenes Foundation in the US, and there's, Cinemind in my own country, in the Netherlands. There's lots of organizations active now in this field, and and understandably, their focus is their own, the industry in their own countries, respective countries. But I did wonder, maybe one of the explanations that so much of this stuff started in Australia, or was beginning to be documented in Australia, over 10 years ago, the Actors Wellbeing Study, for example, 2015, was maybe has something to do with the fact that we're talking about an industry that actually isn't national, that is global, and especially Australia being used is maybe not the right word, but as a production and post-production hub for the American film industry and for the British film industry, maybe supercharge some of this, the interdependence, the precarity of the industry of being, part of a global production network. I mean, is that something that you see that contributes to this? I mean, there's unique issues in any country, of course, but then also being part of a global industry network, which in Australia you inevitably are. Does that sort of supercharge some of these issues, or is that not a particular factor that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think that's necessarily driving the growth. I'd probably what I'd put it down to, maybe if anything, is the individuals, because all these
Mm,
individuals around the world are driving this kind of change, really.
right.
It's a grassroots kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even though, say, the UK Film and TV Charity is a big organization, there was impacts there that the people that were on the ground said, no, we need to change direction because this is a really big thing.
Mm,
So I would put it down to the individual people that are, you know, driving, the cause, um, rather than, I think, any kind of bigger kind of global forces, I would say. And that's speaking from experience as a person trying to do as much as I'm able to do. It's really difficult.
yeah.
And my colleagues around the world that I speak to that are trying to do this as well, it's very difficult.
Mm,
It's very difficult to drive this change. So I don't think it's necessarily because Australia is a global hub and we've got productions coming through that's driving that change. I think it's the people that are on the ground,
mm,
um, like Andy, like you say, from the advertising industry, um, was like, okay, we've got an issue here. Well, what can I do? And set something up and drive it.
right.
Um, is what I would say is doing it. And in some countries, um, there's maybe either more people or um, like more people driving it that have discovered it or had that experience that they want to do something about it. But also, a lot of this stuff, if you are sharing your own personal experience, potentially can come at a real or a perceived cost to somebody's career. So why people don't speak out about some of this stuff or the conditions they're facing in the industry, it's, a perceived or actual kind of, risk that you may be taking. So,
Mm,
I reached that point, and through my own discovery through making the film of who I am and what's important, and to be completely honest, I don't really care about my career anymore.
yeah.
I don't. I just don't
Mm,
care. So
mm,
there's no risk for me to speak up about this stuff anymore. But
right.
there are for others.
Yeah.
So whether other people like me have got to that point. No, this we have to change this. I'm so passionate about this now, at the expense of some of that other stuff.
Mm.
But I do think it's the people on the ground that are really, um, I would say, driving this, because it is just so hard. It's so hard to get funding. It's so hard to drive initiatives. It's so hard to, you know, collaborate, like bring people together to work on a particular thing, you know.
Um, yeah, absolutely. And maybe very specifically talking about people that can make a difference and that are making a difference. Um, I mean, last year, I mean, Screamwell came out with a specific report regarding leadership, right, and the role of leaders in production work. There was a screen leader summit, of course, at the ABC earlier this year. Um, and I want to maybe ask you specific. I mean, you mentioned that, globally this is a grassroots movement. It's driven by individuals that signal, even either have their own personal experience and document it and start a conversation, or through some kind of organization. It seems from the limited perspective that I have that as the discussion is evolving, it becomes a bit less about how individuals can learn to cope, but more about the responsibility of people in powerful positions, in leaders, directors, people who run production companies, that can take some of this responsibility of changing the culture on set, or to implement a specific law or policy regarding, for example, bullying or transgressive behavior. What do you see as the specific challenge for leaders in this area, for people who, because one thing that I've found in my research is that quite a few people who become leaders, of course, in creative careers, aren't necessarily trained to be,
Mhm.
and not generally also not adequately supported to be leaders. And especially among those who really want to do well, who care about their colleagues, and often feel, and I think I read that in the Screenwell report on leadership as well, feel yeah, quite lonely and like under resourced to really make a difference. I mean, how do you see the specific role of leaders on set and in the screen industry regarding health and well-being?
Yeah, no, you're completely right. So, Leadership Matters report, only 7% of screen leaders in Australia had screen-specific leadership skills and training. So, the
Yeah,
vast majority of our leaders are go into leadership positions based on their creative skills and merit, and have
right.
work their way to that position, and deservedly so, for their great craft and creative skills. But equally, they don't feel supported doing their job as well. So
Mm,
this is not necessarily a story of leaders are really bad and they're doing a really bad job. This is not it at all. They also need support. And there are incredible leaders doing incredible work,
mm,
and they do care a lot.
mm,
So in my mind, it's a leadership kind of responsibility, but it's also an individual responsibility, and we all kind of need to be doing our bit. We need to be looking out for ourselves. We need to look out for our colleagues, and leaders also need to be doing their best. I think one of the things that can happen with in the leadership space, like you say, they don't necessarily have the training in certain skills to be leaders. So it can be really difficult and quite overwhelming when you're facing so many different challenges and budgets and all kinds of stresses and things pulling and vying for your attention. And it's also quite often what happens with our producers as well. They're
mm,
investing their own fees, as the contingency budget if they need it, so they don't necessarily get paid, or their fees are linked into profits if they see profits down the line, that they maybe can make some money back. But then they need to be, optioning the next project as well and getting that one off the ground as well. So it's a really incredible thing for a really difficult thing for our producers, that we're the lion's share of burden and responsibility in this space. So there's a lot on their shoulders.
right.
They are also facing so many different new things like bullying and harassment and how that is changing our toxic workplaces. They're also facing how to have more sustainable productions, environmental friendly, climate change, working towards those kind of targets. They're also working towards, improving, different cultures, historically underrepresented like groups, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes. So they're trying to learn and understand this. They're also being asked to be responsible for cultural awareness about the content that we're making and the lands that we're filming on, and those local responsibilities as well.
Mm.
And then Screamo is also coming to them and say, hey, and there's also the well-being and mental health of your people that you want to look after. So when you look at it from that perspective, from their perspective, there's a lot
Right.
that the governments have been rightly so legislating for, that in our case, the screen agencies who fund a lot of our programming are asking for that paperwork or tick that box. But who's actually helping them upskill and
Right.
upskill their teams for these big culture changes we're asking them to make? Not a hell of a lot of people.
No.
And what is happening as well, we know from the people that are funding this content, that they're squeezing budgets. So they're meant to pay for all this extra training and support and time for their staff to go through all this stuff, but there's no financial, way to do that. So, you know, that's looking at some of the big kind of systemic issues that I don't think any leader, any funder, anybody with all those issues that I mentioned, these culture issues that we're trying to, push the needle on. I don't think even our highest leaders will go that they're not important. So
Mm.
what we're really negotiating here, and why Screamo wanted to bring all those leaders together, all the funders together, all the big production companies, all the streamers, all the networks, all together in our leadership summit with the ABC, was to start having that conversation
Mm.
and doing a bit of a workshop to understand what's important, how we're going to solve this. And we've 2 weeks ago started our roundtable discussions with those leaders as well. And by October, we're aiming to have our mental health action plan for the Australian screen industry.
Wow. Yeah. No, it reminds me of also some research among managers in the music industry that talk about, I mean, just the impossible position that you're in because, yeah, you're responsible, like you said, you're responsible for the numbers, budgets, stay within budget, profit, revenue that you yourself are tied into, and but then you're also a parent because like you have because you're working with creatives and with people who are so invested and you want to take care of them, you care personally as well as professionally, and so and all the other roles. I mean, you're wearing so many different hats at the same time and nobody prepared you for any of this. So yeah, that's seems to be such a significant phase in all of this process, which leads me to my closing question, Ben, and we've touched upon this during our conversation. Um, it certainly seems that, in part because of the work that you've done and that colleagues have done in Australia and other parts of the world, then of course COVID. You mentioned Me Too at the outset of our conversation. There's a couple of developments that together have seemed to have propelled some kind of momentum for this conversation about healthier ways of doing the work, of caring for each other, caring for ourselves, coping with the specific stresses of these industries. How do you see this moving forward? Like, what's next? Is it sort of one step at a time? Do you have a big sort of like that's where we're all moving towards? What is sort of your take on where this discussion and where this development on health and well-being in the industry is going?
Mm. Yeah, so I think for us, the mental health action plan that we're working on will be our most robust strategy to date with industry for industry.
Right.
It will be, I mean, it's a co-design thing, but we've had three other strategies prior to this point at Screenwell over the years that have been adapted and then strengthened as far as what our focuses are. So I believe that action plan for the Australian industry will be, our pathway forward as an industry, and we're still underway with that. So it's hard to really kind of that process needs to unfold first before we know the full direction that I think the industry will go down. But certainly, a first AD, Andrew McAnally, who's a colleague that I've worked on a few things, explained it to me this way recently, as far as we've been spending a lot of money, a lot of focus, I think, in Australia, and possibly you could say, in other territories around the world as well, it might relate to, but we've been spending a lot of our focus on building infrastructure. So building studios, building equipment stores, getting all that kind of infrastructure together, that and the grips gear and all that. So the grips have been investing in gear, and the camera guys have been investing in gear, or the camera people have been investing in gear. So everyone's been investing in all that stuff. Yeah. And the budgets for our stuff goes to a lot of that. And it feels like the shift is maybe now coming to the people. Our people, and investing in our people, not investing in our gear and our infrastructure anymore. And I kind of think he's maybe onto something there. We're talking about, accessibility, coordinators. So talking about people, talking about culture, cultural safety, talking about people. We're talking about leadership. We're talking about people. So many of these movements are about people, improving things for people, because we matter. And if you look at the global kind of, retention rates that we're all kind of facing, and crew shortages in certain roles and departments, I've been asking for a while, what's the cause of that? Is there any research that actually says what's the cause that's driving that? Is it just skill shortage? Is it just we don't know how to be production accountants? So it's the accounting skills, which is where the money's going, and what the focus certainly is about upskilling people in certain roles.
Right.
I reckon it's about the people. Our industry is not attracting people. Our people are leaving. So Griffith University's research that we supported, collaborated with them on recently, 25% of the people surveyed are likely to leave the industry within 6 months. That's a quarter of the people.
Yeah.
So we are having people leaving the industry because of the way we're treating our people in various different ways, whether it's long hours, not being accessible for, having a work-life balance, or looking after elderly parents, or being a parent yourself. Like, there's reasons that people are leaving. There's reasons why the young folk coming into our industry dip their toe into the professional world after they've gone to film school or done some course. They come in, they go, oh, no, I don't want to work in that industry. That's a terrible industry. It's toxic. They treat me shit. I'm not getting paid really well.
Right.
And they're leaving. So people, I think, is the future of the sustainability of the global film industry, really.
I'm so happy you're not saying AI. No, I mean, I think I'm so not only personally agree with you, but that's what I see in the research everywhere else as well. Is like the revolutionary turnover rate in creative professions, the loss of diversity of voices, of talent. I mean, it's both among newcomers as well as among senior, sort of more experienced people. They're just leaving, and yeah, I mean, that in and of itself makes this such an urgent matter. So thank you so much, Ben, for taking the time and for the work that you do, that Screenwell does, and yeah, really looking forward to that action plan in October. So definitely going to circle back towards that at the time.
Yeah, my pleasure. No problem at all. And thanks for the awesome work that you've done in the research and bringing all the kind of global stuff together. Because I did want to say one of your earlier kind of points and questions, I think there is much more room and space for us together as a global screen industry to kind of come together as much as we can, more collaboratively. I think we are making connections that way. We are having conversations.
Right.
But I think going back to that initial point of it's the people that are driving it. We just are so under-resourced and just have so much to do in our territories. I think sometimes we can lose sight of that bigger, frame, that bigger picture really of that could work better for everybody if we strengthen those international ties and learn from each other and share resources and pool resources that way. But when you're in the trenches in your territory and you're looking at the problems you're solving, it just can be so hard to find time for, those conversations and those meetings and those working groups to kind of really, really take off. Yeah, because all of us have those urgent fires that we're trying to help with in our own territories. But I think we need to try to, as a global creative industry, do much better that way.